I spent Shabbat wandering the streets of Basel, first trying to imagine what passed through the minds of the delegates to the first Zionist Congress when they strolled the streets of Basel on Shabbat, August 28, 1897, Lamed B'Av Tafresh Nun Zayin, the day before the Congress convened on Rosh Chodesh Elul. And then I tried to imagine what they would think if they were cast forward like God cast Moshe forward to Akiva's Beit Midrash and could see what had become of their scheme 125 years later. This second thing was the easier thing to imagine. Surely they would not be without criticism, but still surely they would be astonished, overwhelmed, overjoyed by the success, by the prosperity of the Zionist project. Max Nordau, who said in his speech at the first Congress that, quote, "Everywhere where Jews have settled, Jewish misery prevails. The majority of Jews are a race of accursed beggars. The poverty grinds the Jew's character and destroys his body," end quote. He would be amazed by the boisterous joy that wells up on a Tel Aviv street on a Friday afternoon and by the wealth in evidence on the streets every day of the week. Nordau, who talked as a physician of the need to foster generations of Muskeljuden, would also be astonished by the 2 gold, 1 silver, and 3 bronze medals that Israeli athletes won at this month's European Championship, and all the more so by the tireless competence and year-in, year-out success of the IDF, an army of Jews defending a Jewish nation so brilliantly. Herzl, whom, as we heard from Micha Gutman, believed with such faith that it is the mission of Jews to reform the very nature of society and economy everywhere through their mastery of technology and science, would be confounded, breathless, by the ways in which just that is happening before our eyes in the Jewish state, as anyone who's been in the parallel conference going on alongside knows, to degrees that even Herzl, a genius of imagination, did not have the imagination to dream. Achad Ha'am, a censorious observer of the First Zionist Congress, well, it's easy to imagine his delight and relief touring the National Library today with Ruth Calderon, as she suggested yesterday, or better, visiting the astonishing factory of Jewish culture, that temple to Jewish culture, Alma, that Ruth Calderon built in Tel Aviv. The 197 delegates to the First Zionist Congress would agree that Zionism has been an impossible success, building a state, ingathering exiles, creating a culture of such beauty and creativity, a success in all the big ways that so many speakers have described over the past day and a half here, and in all the more intimate ways that I, like most every other parent in the Jewish state, register as a miracle. For instance, every time that I hear from the mouths of my own kids the most beautiful Hebrew, rich with allusion to Tanakh and Talmud and Rishonim and Achronim and the poet Rachel and all the rest. They would all have agreed that the Jewish state is today prosperous in more ways than they had the power even to dream 125 years ago on these streets of Basel. The title of our discussion is, quote unquote, "The Prosperity of the Jewish People, Challenges and Opportunities." And on stage beside me, are 2 of the present-day authors of the Jewish state's remarkable prosperity. Karnit Pflug, in addition to many other things in an illustrious career, was, as you know, for 5.5 years the governor of the Bank of Israel, demonstrating a steely resolve and a visionary sense of purpose. And she is rightly seen by most all to be among the best bank governors in Israel's history, and in her day to have been among the most successful and talented bank governors in the world. Major General Gershom HaKohen, in an IDF career that spanned almost 40 years, was commander of the Northern Corps of the IDF, commander of the IDF colleges, head of the Training and Doctrine Division in the General Staff, and more. And in 2005, it was he who oversaw Israel's disengagement from the Gaza Strip. In our brief session here today, I would like to ask each of you 2 things. First, I would like to ask you each to give a quick account, each in your own realm, of the state of the Jewish state's prosperity today and the challenges that face it. After we've heard from both of you about this, I'll ask you, especially in light of Professor Yedidya Stern's important comments yesterday, about the relationship between Israel's thriving, to which you've each contributed so much, and the quote-unquote prosperity of the Jewish people. The two things may not, in every case, be identical. So let's begin with you, Professor Flug. What is the state of Israel's economic and social prosperity today?
Thank you, Noach, and thank you for the kind introduction. In one word, the state of the economy is good. Actually, it's impressively good even in these turbulent times. And the good state of the economy is reflected in a very high growth, in very low unemployment, in high employment, in rising standard of living that we sometimes are not aware of, in prospering high-tech sector, which is the engine of the Israeli economy, and with relatively stable prices, even though we've seen some increase in inflation, but much more modest than in other places. And the reason why the economy is doing so well is because it has a generally sound financial system, a relatively low public debt, and generally, I would say, reasonably well-managed macroeconomics. However, we also have some challenges, and the main challenge, which has been with us over the last 30 years or so, is the fact that productivity is growing relatively slowly. And that's basically reflecting, I would say, three areas of weakness. One is our infrastructure is insufficient. We're not investing enough, especially given the relatively rapid growth of population, which means that the needs for increased infrastructure are growing. We have an educational system that there is room for improvement. It's not providing sufficient skills to the entire population. There is a relatively narrow part that are very well equipped to go in any places, and we've seen some of the reflection of that in the high-tech sector and the impact sector that presented here many of the very innovative ideas, but it's not what is given to the entire population. And the third part is our bureaucracy and the inefficient regulation. There is a lot of room to improve. And that is, these challenges are reflected in very large socioeconomic gaps, very large economic gaps. We have two populations that are not engaged enough in economic activity, and when they're engaged, they don't get high wages because of the relative limited skills. There are very wide gaps across populations and between the periphery and the center of Israel. And there are some other challenges that I may expand more later on if time permits.
Thank you.
Maybe one other thing. I think the fact that we have a political instability hampers the ability to actually apply reforms that are looking into the longer term. The fact that politicians don't know how long they will be in power means that they are too focused on short-term achievements rather than on really fixing fundamental issues that would really help deal with these challenges.
Wonderful. Gershon, what is the state of Israel's prosperity in the field of security?
First of all, prosperity for the Jewish people is not a universal consideration of prosperity. The Jewishness anxiety of existence is unique. Therefore, the prosperity of the Jewish people must be considered as unique phenomena. In that way, it means Jewish prosperity, we cannot speak only about economical affairs. It must be judged according to other aspects like cultural aspects, demographical aspects, territorial aspects in our land, etc., and of course religious prosperity. And all that coming to be existed and exemplified in the Jewish existence in Israel, only in the land of Israel. And speaking about security, that as well must be considered from the uniqueness of the Jewish phenomena. The anxiety of Jewish people is unique, and the security of Jewish people is also unique. Just yesterday, we saw the example of the rabbi of Ukraine, how he is inspired from the achievements of IDF. And what he's doing in Ukraine is Kiddush Hashem that we could never really imagine before the existence of the Jewish freedom and homeland and IDF. More than that, I'm always emphasizing that to every American general that I had a meeting with him or something like that, when the American president declaring a very, very repeated declaration, we are committed to the security of Israel, I'm getting anxiety. What I'm telling them, listen, forget about security. We are not living in Israel just for security. If this is a story, why not in California? One day, I came to visit United States in the Pentagon, first star general responsible to the Mediterranean arena, to the desk of Mediterranean arena, told us the following. At the end, everyone wants the same. Kids going to school in security, restaurants are open to midnight. I told him that my objection. If you are thinking like that, not only you are not beginning to understand Bin Laden, you are not beginning to understand me and the whole Zionistic project. Because if we want just kids going to school in security, etc., why not in California? And the whole mission of Zionism in Israel is far away from prosperity and security. And therefore, we must translate the prosperity to the uniqueness of our story. For example, no translation for the word aliyah. It is far away from being translated to immigration. It means everything unique.
Okay, so in light of, thank you for that. In light of what you said, yesterday, Professor Yedidya Stern pointed out that the old contract between Israel and the diaspora is suddenly changing in front of our eyes, and he said, and I'm quoting, 40% of young Jews under 30 in America today do not support Zionism, and the question we must ask is how do we act within a new equation? Many of these young Jews in the diaspora view Israel's security not just as not being confluent, identical to the security of all Jews in the world, but in some ways at being at odds. They say that when Israel sells, for instance, the Pegasus technology of NSO to Saudis, or when Israel sells arms to Myanmar, they are creating insecurity for Jews around the world while serving their own security. Do you think that there are circumstances in which the prosperity of Israel and the prosperity of the Jewish people are different and maybe even incompatible?
Not at all. It is a specific disease of a young Jewry in the United States. It is a mental disease coming from the DNA of Judaism, too much coming from Christian or Judeo-Christian orientation. Absolutely, in our daily life, we are understanding that the sword is holy. Why? Because we are coming to bring back the life of the Jews back to history and to sovereignty, and this could not be achieved without the sword. And this is the main revolution of Zionism, that only in the land of Israel, we, the Jews, are taking responsibilities to the triangle, to the equitation that is declared in every National Defense College, that there is a relationship between stability, security, and prosperity. And in the land of Israel, we are doing that to our own, by our own hands, doing that for our own future. This is not happening in diaspora. This is the uniqueness of the new life of Jews in Israel.
Karnit?
Well, I heard yesterday Shlomit Ravitsky Turpaz talking about Tikkun Olam as being the concept that would bring young American Jews to identify more with Judaism and with Zionism. And I think what we've heard in the parallel sessions, the kind of putting our innovative technologies into areas which can really contribute to the good of the world, I think if these young American Jews would be more exposed to the kind of initiatives in agrotech, in education, in clean tech, in water, in health, in all of these areas where we have really great ideas, great entrepreneurs, great people that really invest in impact and in solutions to the global world, I think that would really bring people from all over the world to identify much more with Israel. So I think that's another perspective.
Both of you have spent late nights in the halls of power in Israel where decisions of import are made. Do you think that Israel ought to ask the question, is the policy that we are pursuing, is it supporting the prosperity of world Jewry when it makes decisions?
I think it's not only a question of a world Jewry perspective, but I think the question is what are our ethics and what are our morals when we decide to, for example, sell arms or offensive cyber products to regimes that are questionable. So I think it's more related to our standards, our ethics, and our morals.
Gershon, there's 1 minute.
First of all, the existence of Israel became indispensable, not only for Jews in diaspora, but for all the universe. Solution for problem of water in California coming from Israeli ideas. But more than that, the main existence of Israel could be summarized by the words of Jan Karski. He was the member of the Polish underground in Warsaw. He brought the pictures from Ghetto Warsaw. After anniversary, he declared the following: could a new Holocaust could really emerge again? Yes, absolutely yes. People are the same, nothing was changed. But for the Jews, it couldn't happen again because now there is Israel. Not that we can do everything, but the inspiration of that existence makes a difference.
I can't think of a better point to end at. Thank you very much, and thank you.